and now I'm an adult orphan. not not something I expected. I feel like I've identified myself as a dead mom person for so long, and it's weird that now it's not just that. And here we are, and it's still very surreal. I feel like it hasn't all fully sunk in yet. I don't know how long that's going to take.
Hi there, grief growers, and welcome back to the Grief Grower podcast. I am so honored to be sitting here across from you, with you, in your ears today. If you have been growing alongside me in my work for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to my work, hello. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach, a two-time author, and the founder of Life After Loss Academy, which is a course and community that has helped grievers stop feeling lost, stuck, broken, and alone, and helped them gradually build lives they love from the lives that loss has forced them to live. Here on the show, we believe that loss and grief are not things to get over or muscle through, but things that we walk alongside, that we integrate and fold in for the rest of our lives, and that when we do life with grief in ways that resonate with us, we can create beautiful lives from the ones that loss has forced you to live, because you deserve a good life, even if it wasn't the one that you thought that you would be living. Today on the show, I am speaking with illustrator and author Tyler Fetter, whose mom died almost 2 decades ago and whose dad died recently this past winter. We are discussing the grief of cumulative loss, facing more than one loss in what feels to us like a short period of time, how at some point no part of the calendar is safe from grief, the relationship between grief and anxiety and how one can influence the other, and how writing and art can help you process life after loss. Here's a little bit about Tyler. Tyler Fetter is an artist whose work explores big feelings, feminism, and pop culture. Her debut solo work, Dancing at the Pity Party, a graphic memoir about the premature death of her super cool mom, won the Sidney Taylor Gold Medal for Young Adult Literature. Tyler also wrote and illustrated the picture books Bodies Are Cool and Are You Mad at Me? Tyler, I am so excited to have you on Grief Grower because your book, Dancing at the Pity Party, which we'll talk about a fair bit, was one that I picked up by accident because we're going way back to 2020, but I bought a book from Anderson's bookstore in Naperville, Illinois, because one of my favorite authors was coming through there on tour. And then COVID happened, and Anderson's was like, we had to cancel the event. We've got your signed books here. You got to come pick them up and show your little ticket receipt, whatever. And so my best friend and I went out there, and I was like, let's just look around, browse all the aisles while we're here. And in the grief section, I saw your book, Dancing at the Pity Party, and picked it. I read the whole thing in the store, and then I bought it. And so I've been following you and your work ever since, and the connections to being in the Dead Moms Club, living in and around Chicago, and just losing a parent in what one of my former podcast interview hosts, I was the person being interviewed, called your launchpad years. Like when you're trying to figure out who you are as an adult and you're trying to leave the nest and establish yourself in the world, and losing a parent then is a very particular sort of niche loss. I think a lot of people imagine losing parents when they're in their 50s and their 60s, not when they're 19 and 21 respectively. And so I have just been tethered to your work ever since. So if you could start us off, tell us a little bit first about Dancing at the Pity Party, and anything else regarding your losses, plural now, that you'd like to share. And then we'll get into why we're actually having this conversation and the Instagram DM that I sent you.
Great. So until I was just turned 19, I guess, I had never had any major losses in my family. My great grandma died in her 90s when I was 12, but we weren't super close because she was so unwell the whole time. And I'd lost distant people, but it felt like that's a thing for other people. And then the summer before my sophomore year of college, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and she lived for 8 months. She died like right after I came home for spring break. That same school year that I was going into, and it just was like a huge shock. But there were so many shocks throughout, and uh, then I made this book, Dancing at the Pity Party, which is a graphic memoir, which I like to explain is not a memoir that has graphic detail, but I mean, I guess it does a little bit.
Why would I never think of that as an interpretation? But you're right.
I feel like I don't know how common of an expression that is to people who aren't like in the comics world. But basically, it's like a comic book, but it's a memoir. And I made it when my mom had been gone for 10 years. So I had had a pretty significant chunk of time to process everything and kind of like come into who I am as a dead mom person. And so it came out in April of 2020. So I had this whole book tour planned, and then everything got canceled, and it came out like right after lockdown started. And I did a bunch of Zoom events, and that was really cool. And then between when the book came out and now, two like close grandparents died, and then my dad just died in December. He had gotten cancer like multiple times pretty soon after my mom died, and was in treatment for it, and then it was in remission for a long time, and it came back the January before last, and then all of last year he was sick, and it came back in stage 4. When he had it, it was like stage 2 maybe, and he died in home hospice in early December, and now I'm an adult orphan. not not something I expected. I feel like I've identified myself as a dead mom person for so long, and it's weird that now it's not just that. And here we are, and it's still very surreal. I feel like it hasn't all fully sunk in yet. I don't know how long that's going to take.
Yeah, and I morbidly laugh about that one as well because despite the fact that my mom has been gone 11 years, there are still days where I'm like, I don't know if it's sunk in yet. I don't know if that's all the way real, and I don't know that it ever will be. And I think a lot of like traditional or old-fashioned grief experts might say something along the lines of like, "Oh, you're just still in denial." And I'm like, "No,
Yeah,
there's more to it than that." But I think there's some really cool research coming out now. I'm thinking of like Mary Frances O'Connor and the grieving brain of like my grieving brain is still trying to piece together understanding or comprehension of a world where my mom doesn't physically exist, even though I like see and feel reminders of her all the time. And so the sense that a loss could ever sink in 100%, I don't know that that's real. I'm like, I think my mom is dead to me about like 97% of the time now. Like maybe the percentage increases, but I don't know that it ever feels all the way true. Whether I think people listening are like, oh, I still feel connected to them, so they're never all the way gone, or it's like the reality hasn't ever fully landed. It's kind of just hovering
yeah. I
all the
mean, I
time.
still have times, much less frequently than I used to, but where something will happen in my life, or I'll hear like a bit of news or something and think, oh, I have to tell mom.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's been 16 years. Like, get it through your thick skull.
I like how you talk to yourself.
I'm very kind to myself, as you can hear.
I love that. I resonate with that. And this is kind of the biggest reason I wanted to talk to you because the memoir, and I love that it's a graphic memoir because as a kid I was obsessed with reading like manga and not necessarily like, comic books, but especially from Japan and other countries. But then when I realized people were doing nonfiction through comic and illustration formats, I was like, oh, I'm into this. And it's one of my all-time favorite genres, not just of grief books, but of books in general. And so I picked this up, and especially for Grief Brain, when you can't read, I'm like, I can look at pictures
Uh-huh.
is so incredibly helpful. And I say pictures, but your drawings are so um, relatable and clever, but also at the same time feel like something I might have drawn like in the margins of like a high school or middle school notebook with like the little stars or the little raindrops or the little hearts or the smiley faces or the sad faces. And it feels like I don't, it's just like it's a snapshot in time of how you draw and how you relate. So I just love that such a thing as a graphic memoir exists. And the reason I reached out to you is because you recently drew a series of Instagram, like a carousel. And for people who are keeping score at home, it was posted on November 29th, 2024. So if you want to scroll back on Tyler Fetter's Instagram, you can see this post. But I'm just going to read it because I can't show you the pictures here, but I'll link to it in the show notes so you can go read it and then find out more about Tyler's work. But she did a series of like panels, illustrated panels, where she writes, in 2020, I made my first book called Dancing at the Pity Party, a graphic memoir about losing my mom to cancer when I was 19. What I left out of the book is that about a year after my mom died, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. They caught it early, though. He had surgery, and then life got back to mostly normal. And then there's like you in an armchair, oh, thank God, which is perfect. Until a few years passed, and the woman my dad was dating felt a lump in his breast. Whenever I'd tell anyone my situation, it felt like I was a little kid, making excuses for not doing my homework, over explaining and adding so much detail that it all ends up sounding like a lie, which relatable because at some point you rack up so many losses that you're like, it feels like my life is not even real. And I tell it to other people and they think I'm making it all up. Absolutely. Months later, after a mastectomy and many rounds of chemo at the same place my mom went, oof, my dad went into remission, and then you again, oh, thank God. Um, Years passed. I got a book deal to write about my mom. My dad was thrilled. He wrote me an extremely sweet Goodreads review and constantly updated me on how many likes his review, was getting. Shout out to your father. I love him so much. um, every year he'd have a checkup with his oncologist and happily call us to say he's still good. Finally, a cancer success story. And then there's a picture of a shark fin in the bottom corner that says the Jaws theme intensifies. At the beginning of this year, we found out it came back. Today, he started hospice. My emotional state has been fragile. Some days I feel kind of numb, but mostly stable. Other days it's like I got shot out of some kind of cannon that is also a time machine. It feels weird to talk about it here, but it also feels weird not to talk about it. When my mom was dying, I felt really isolated in my grief, but today I feel so lucky to be a part of the community we have here. I really value being able to dump messy emotions into art and then hear from readers and followers who relate. I'm sure I'll make plenty of art about this in the future, but for right now, I guess I just wanted you to know thank you for being here. And this comes right before you did another wonderful post, again for people keeping score at home, on December 5th, 2024, about your mom's death taking place in the spring and her in life counting down to spring and looking for signs of spring as an occasion, because I think your birthday's in the spring. Do I have that right? And so like looking for bunnies or little robins or like flowers popping out of the earth. It's so exciting to look forward to. And then in her dying on the first-ish day of spring, there's this sense of I was counting down to her death. And then with your dad beginning hospice in November and then dying in early December, there was a season of life that was full of grief and hard. It was spring. There is a new season that is full of grief and hard. It is November, December, and I imagine all the holidays and New Year crap that comes with it. And the biggest reason I wanted to have you on was to talk about how when you start accumulating losses, when you don't just experience one loss, you start having two or three or four, not to mention your grandparents, your great-grandparent, other losses that maybe aren't death related. I'm thinking like breakups or job losses or COVID or things like that. You go from having pockets or times in the calendar that feel safe from grief to suddenly having what feels like your entire calendar overrun by things that remind you of the people you've lost. Because there's like a tipping point where like I've now lost so many that I survive one season and I go immediately into surviving the next one. So that's a very long-winded way of saying thank you for that piece you wrote. And also, I would love for you to speak more on this sensation of at first there was just one grief season in my calendar and now there are many.
Yeah. It's interesting. Before my dad was sick this last time, I'd had um, a thing in therapy probably multiple times. I was talking about how like my mom got sick over the summer, so that was bad. Then she was really into a lot of the Jewish holidays that are in fall, sort of like
Hmm.
early fall. So that time of year makes me think of her. Then she died in spring, so that makes me think of her. And then her birthday is in December, and we would always celebrate it on winter break. So it was like every single season was related to her in some way. But it definitely is that like very early spring. That's the time that just feels like uh, I mentioned it in the comic I made. It feels like right after a scab falls off, and it's like you're healed technically, but it still feels really uncomfortable,
Yeah.
sensitive. Um, and yeah, now that my dad died, I mean, he was sick basically the entire calendar year. So the grief is a little bit less concentrated than it was with my mom. My mom was sick when I was in college, and I went to college in a different state from where my family lived. So I saw her at these like specific moments, and then I would go back to college. But with my dad, he lived in Chicago just like me. I saw him all the time. Um, so my sisters and I are just like figuring it out. I think we all sort of feel like we just got like dumped somewhere, like out of the sky. Um, and we realized during my dad's like funeral and Shiva period, when we were spending a lot of time thinking about death, we realized that my dad died 2 weeks roughly before my mom's birthday, and my mom died roughly 2 weeks before my dad's birthday,
Wow.
which is like eerie in a way that I like. Like it feels
Yeah.
like a full circle kind of cool thing. And we were like, we should have like a thing that we do during those 2 week periods. So um, we were calling them Spirit Week, like in like before homecoming. They're not as planned out. It's not like it's 90s day and we all
Yeah.
go to
Or wacky hair day or whatever. I was not expecting that.
you know, so much of grief sort of feels like when you're up really late and everything is just like surreal and funny, and you could just laugh or cry at any moment.
Yes.
Um, so right now, we're just treating them as like during these 2 week periods, we're going to be real gentle with ourselves. Um, it would be fun if we had like a an activity or holiday or whatever each day, and crazy hat day and all that.
Here's me. I know you do the illustration challenge Moodtober where you have to illustrate a new mood every day, but it might be neat to do like Spirit Week illustration themes or something like that. But that's just one of my ideas, but I love that this has, thanks to like your sisters and like your community essentially, it has turned into already a block of time on all of your calendars where it's like, and this is where we honor our grief for this, or this is where we carve out time to like go easy on ourselves, maybe take time off work, maybe see each other, text each other more often, or um, you know, just ask how you're doing. Because yeah, for sure. And this reminds me of a practice that I do inside of the online course that I teach, which is called Life After Loss Academy. And it's like a community of grieving people from all over the world. And there's literally like a printable PDF called the Printable Grief Dates Calendar, and I ask people to go in and look at every month of the year and write down not just your death dates of people that you've lost, but birthdays, anniversaries. There's these things I call dates of knowing. So, like maybe the date you or somebody you love got a diagnosis, or you found out a secret about a loss and it changed your life, or you found out maybe a partner was cheating on you or something, some day that pivoted your life in some major way. And then the calendar is also full of major holidays and occasions that might influence your grief. So, like Mother's Day is a season, Hanukkah is a holiday. And so there's kind of like this whole layout, and you can see all 12 months of like, here's where my grief is really heavy, or there's a lot of concentrated grief in like these 2 months. And then, like, for some reason, July has nothing. Like, for some reason, July is safe. But then there are other seasons where it's like a little grief here, a little grief there. And what it does, the goal of it is not to make you bummed out about how much grief is in your year, because it could be a heck of a lot, especially if you've experienced multiple losses or multiple types of loss. But the goal is kind of to your point to say which seasons of the year are more grief heavy and how can I protect them? Like, how can I draw a circle around this spot or create something like Spirit Week or host a cookie marathon in honor of my aunt or something that we're all doing remotely from our different places. Or my best friend, Tammy, who died 3 years ago, her death anniversary was 3 days ago at the time that we're recording this. And every year, as many of us as we can, and this year it was just four of us, but we meet up at the memorial tree and bench that we had like established for her on the Chicago lakefront, and then we all go get bubble tea. Like, it's just, there's just like little pockets of things that you can plan in advance for, because so much of grief is unpredictable that it feels like a slight way to anchor yourself in the whole rest of the year and the whole rest of the timeline, when like, who knows what's going on economically, politically, socially, financially, relationally? Like, who knows what the hell is going to happen for the rest of the year, especially as you accumulate losses. So I love that even if it wasn't done with like that level of consciousness, that instinct to create a barrier or like draw a circle around this and say it's Spirit Week and we have two of them every year now for our parents. Um, I just love that. I just love that.
I love it too. I something that I kind of like about grief is that for me it's pretty uncomplicated in general. I like have anxiety and just like all the mental crap, and every emotion just feels like it's a bunch of different things like knotted into a ball, and there's guilt, and with grief it's just like I'm sad because a bad thing happened. Like it feels like if you break your leg and you're like, I just have to heal my leg hurts. So there's a lot less like complicated, difficult uh, feeling about just being like, this is a period that is an anniversary of a sad time, and so I'm just going to be nice to myself. Just it feels like I can just plan it and we're good, and that's comforting to me.
I like that. I have genuinely never heard anybody else say that before. But this sense of like, yeah, my grief's pretty straightforward. It's not layered with a bunch of emotional complexity. It just asks that I look at it and take care of it, and I'll see you next year, or I'll see you next month, or I'll see you tomorrow. It's one of these things that's like, I don't know if you would describe it as annoying, but like for a lot of people, I imagine like it's an annoying constant, but it's a constant.
Yeah, in my book I said that all the mentions of cancer everywhere in the world feel like mosquito bites, and it's just like, stop, like get away from me. And it's not necessarily like you're getting like bit by a snake or something, but it no one likes getting mosquito bites constantly all the time.
Yeah, it's like a low grade poking invasion
Mm-hmm.
all the time. It's a low grade agitation, absolutely. I want to, and if you're not comfortable answering this question, obviously let me know, but I kind of want to pivot to this idea of you've now lost two parents to cancer, and I don't know if you've lost other people in your life to cancer as well, but there's kind of this sense, and you talk about this in your book, of being aware that this is a very real way people could die at like pretty reasonably young ages. And I wonder how kind of living with that recognition of like uncertainty all the time, um, just like impacts your life. Like, I or anybody else I know could have cancer at any time because it has now happened at least twice. Um, and that's something that lives in my brain pretty rent free as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it sucks. The cancer that my mom had, we initially thought that it was ovarian cancer, and then it ended up being this like rare one called choriocarcinoma that I saw one time on an episode of a medical show, but outside of that, never heard of anywhere ever. It was just this like weird fluke. And then my dad died of breast cancer. He's a cis man, not a thing that people hear about a lot. So it feels like, I like to say if you hear that like there's a 99% chance that someone's going to be okay, it makes me think, well, there's that 1% that they won't be okay. And I'm just kind of on edge all the time. It's one of the big pillars I think that I work on in therapy is just how to live without being in a constant state of bracing myself for
Mm-hmm.
bad news about other people or about myself. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've thought I felt a lump somewhere that was a pimple or something. Like I
Like
just,
I just keep counting. I have at least three that I can remember where I took myself to an urgent care, but it has to be
yeah,
more than that at this point.
I had a time a few months ago when I thought I had this weird, like, uh, bump on my hand, and I was like, "What is this?" And I just watched that show, Apple Cider Vinegar, on Netflix.
I loved that show.
I should not have watched it. Like the amount of cancer in it was not good for me to see.
That's true.
I
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So cancer people out there, take care when you're scrolling through Netflix. Yeah.
but one of the people in that show gets cancer where it shows as like sores on her arm. So I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, I have hand cancer. And then I looked after like a good, I don't know, 5 minutes of straight panic. I realized that the shape of the bump was identical to um, the little camera things on the back of my phone. Like
Okay.
that and realized, oh, that's a mirror. Even when I realized that, I still, for a little while, was like, I don't know, maybe it's a fluke. And it's really exhausting to just be in that state all the time. Um, but it's tough when there's like literal proof that just something can happen and you don't even know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that I think that people who are alongside grievers or bosses of grievers or friends of grievers like don't think that we're thinking. That's a lot of think in the same sentence. But I think a lot of people look at me and they're like, oh, she lost her mom. Not, oh, she lost her mom and she's wondering when everyone else around her is going to get cancer. Like, for me, it's a very clear line drawn to that conclusion. And for a lot of other people, they would stop at, you had a loss. And I'm like, I have a loss, but as a result, I have anxiety, recurring thoughts about everyone else's death, probably to cancer, around me all the time. And it's never, I'll say gratefully for me, it's never been something that's like kept me from living my life or kept me from forming relationships with people necessarily, but it is something I'm almost constantly wondering or thinking about. Like it kind of just lives back there. It's like a record player that just just keeps going and I can't lift the little needle on it. It just plays all the time.
And before my mom got sick, like when I was a little kid, I like started having anxiety when I was like being birthed, I think. So I used to be scared that she would die in a car accident like anytime she left the house when I wasn't in the car with her. And I would always be,
Mm.
Mom, I love you, bye. And she'd be like, I'm going to the grocery store. And it after she got sick and died, I was like, did I know something? But the truth is that like it just felt bad all those times. Like I would have rather felt calm and not stressed during the time when she wasn't actively sick. Um, but I think like my brain chemistry and my life circumstance have sort of like combined to form the perfect, like horrible combination of being freaked out about loss all the time.
Yeah, I wonder if you'll feel comfortable speaking more to that. As like I grew up as somebody with anxiety, and then grief added some more layers. Maybe not made it worse, maybe not made it better, but just like added some different permutations and combinations to something that was already there. Because I think for so many people, this is why I ask, consider grief to be something that happens in a vacuum and anxiety to be something that happens in a vacuum. And I think we forget sometimes that people who are anxious sometimes experience loss and it transforms their anxiety into something different, or grows it or deepens it or whatever illustration you want to use for that. And then sometimes grief happens and anxiety is a byproduct of it. It's like the two things are often woven together, and um, it's not necessarily bad that they're woven together or often come alongside in the same package. But I'm curious about how your relationship with anxiety has changed with grief. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna leave it there as a very open-ended
Yeah. Uh,
cue.
when I first was realized that anxiety was like an actual thing that you can be diagnosed with, and it wasn't just me having a bad personality, I was already like post mom death. Um, and for the first chunk of my life, I really just thought it was social anxiety. That was like my main thing. I was super, super shy growing up, and I still feel like that's my natural self. Like me being more outgoing, whatever that looks like for me in social situations, is like I'm just pushing myself all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that was like the primary way that I thought of anxiety for a long time. And then after my mom died and thinking about it more, I learned about generalized anxiety disorder, which is just like being anxious about all kinds of stuff all the time. And I was like, oh, wait, that also applies. I'm not just anxious in social situations. I'm anxious that the elevator is going to break down while I'm on it, or whatever, that I have this career that I love and somehow it's all going to go away in a way that I can't predict. Um, and yeah, grief just kind of like expanded all of that, I think.
The possibilities are endless.
Possibilities of bad stuff happening are endless. I will say that, like, particularly with losing my dad, I have noticed that there's an amount of anxiety that has gone away, because I was just worried all the time about when he was going to die, and now he's gone. So, like, that's obviously bad, but the uncertainty was just like killing me all the time. And because he initially got sick so soon after my mom died, even though there was a really large chunk of time where he was in remission and we like barely talked about it at all, there was still like a little thing in the back of my head of like, you never know. And now just that is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty freeing. And it's also something I'm working on in therapy, is like dealing with this weird relief that I feel. And it feels like disloyal or unkind to my dad. And I know logically that that's not true, and he wouldn't want me to be upset or worried all the time. But it does feel yucky to have any kind of like slightly positive association with grief at all.
Yeah, or just the relief of it. But I really resonate with that sense of, well, that record of, well, when's my dad gonna die? My dad's gonna die. At some point, my dad's gonna die. It has stopped playing. And in a room or a brain, I'm making metaphors here, that's full of constantly playing records that you can't turn off, to have one stop playing.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see how that feels like a relief, especially, and this is true for a lot of my students and clients who are in the same town or in the same home as somebody who's dying, to no longer daily be face to face with their pain or their decline or their suffering or their mentally or physically not being here, or the questions that come up with it, or the weird sibling dynamics or family dynamics that are surrounding it, or the dread of having to essentially, I heard memorial planning being compared to like planning a party or planning a wedding immediately after somebody dies. And I'm like, oh my God, we do expect people to throw a party after a death and like handle the logistics of that. So even the dread of that hanging over your head as well. of like, I'm going to have to throw a memorial that. I'm going to figure out all the logistics of this. To have that record or those records stop playing, I can see how that feels like a relief. And also, that record in a way is a tether to your dad. Not the only one, but to know that was playing is to know in some way you cared about him and were worried about him.
Yeah,
And so
if
it's
you don't
weird to
care
not have that.
about someone, you're not going to be worried about them dying.
Yeah.
It was interesting. We had a Seder for Passover at my dad's wife's apartment. We never called her a stepmom because
I have that too.
like so yeah, it was like
Hmm.
late 20s or something. It just feels weird. So I say my dad's wife. It sounds really impersonal, but she feels like an aunt or something.
Hmm.
Um, but we had the Seder at their apartment, the apartment that my dad lived in with her for 8 years or something, and it's the apartment where he died. Um, and that like halo or haze of stress and grief that was there for a long time, it just felt like it had like cleared away. There was this levity there that I was not expecting, and she had like gotten a new couch that she'd had the same couch in the living room the whole time that she and my dad lived there, and she got a new one that was like lighter in color and it just felt like we're all like taking a breath, and there's still
Hmm.
the sadness and the loss that's like very obvious, but the impending doom of knowing someone is going to die, especially in hospice. At the end, we learn there's the transition to the dying process and then the process of actively dying, which is
Hmm.
such a weird concept. But that whole thing, that was like so heavy and tiring and sad and emotional. And that is something that is like, let go now. And we can just sit with the um, memories and good and bad.
Yeah. It's like your job has changed.
Yeah.
Your job is no longer to worry, to sit vigil, to manage details, potentially with hospice, especially to manage pain or manage logistics, to plan a party. Your job is now to relate, to remember, to, with regard to your illustrations, to like potentially create or make something or to express.
Yeah.
Um, and there's like, I don't know that anybody really talks about the grief of having like your daily job change. Or like, I suppose it can be related to like your identity changing. It's like, I was a caregiver, I was a watcher over, I was a historian, I was a medication administerer. Um, and now I am a co-memory maker
Yeah.
and a sibling remember, honor, or holiday inventor, and a couch appreciator, and
That's the
and
primary one.
yes, and it just you are never sans job in grief. You're never without something to do, but sometimes there is grief in no longer having to do a job because it means that somebody's died. Yeah. I like how you related to that. Or there's just like a lifting of that's not the job anymore. And some jobs definitely feel harder or longer or more unbearable than others, I think.
I mean, there were so many moments when my dad was sick this last time where I would be feeling good for any given reason on a day and then be like, wait, my dad is dying. I should feel bad.
Hmm.
It's, uh, I'm not paying enough attention. Um, it was really complicated, and that is like a less complicated thing about grief. Like I can, if I'm having a day where I feel good now, I can be like, my dad would be so glad that I'm feeling good and like that my sisters and I are still living and enjoying life even without him.
Yeah, it sounds like it's easier to I don't know, to feel like your emotional experience is like all the way in alignment,
Yeah.
that he's not actively leaving or
Yeah,
actively
the
dying.
thing has happened, so I don't have to deal with the thing. I don't know. The thing I was worried about for so long and that was complicating my life so much has happened, and I'm dealing with the repercussions of it, but the day in, day out um, exhaustion, emotional exhaustion of it has dissipated.
Yeah, or the should of I should be focused on his pain, or the fact that I'm gonna lose him soon has like transmuted to I can feel happiness or joy or lightness here and trust that like he would want that, or like he would be happy for me, or like he's not here to worry about, and so there's not like a counterweight on the other side of that being like, no, don't. There's not
Exactly.
like an emotions cop being
Uh-huh.
like, don't feel that.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to feel that way. Yeah, I resonate with that. It definitely felt weird when my mom was dying, and we honestly didn't have very long in her active dying process. We were told we'd have like 6 weeks to 6 months, and then she died in 7 days. But I remember when my art teacher and one of our school counselors like drove by the house. This was during Christmas time to take my sister and I out for coffee, and like Starbucks was a novelty back then. And so we were like, ooh, the adults that we admire are taking us to Starbucks. But I remember like laughing at a Starbucks at Christmas time with like all these carols playing, and I had this vivid sense that I'm like, I'm in the wrong place.
Huh.
I should not be this person right now. And the guilt of not being at home, not staring at my mother 24/7, not like just orienting all of my focus, energy, devotion in her direction um, at 21 was a very surreal thing. I had never had that like juxtaposition before of like I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be feeling like this. And now I can very clearly point to it as like, oh, that's a grief thing.
Huh.
But it took a hot second to be like, oh, that's a grief thing and not just a I am bad or I am wrong thing. Because I think so many people think like I just experience this individually for myself. I want to get to in the last few minutes here some things that you I don't know if enjoy is too positive of a word, but like how drawing, illustration, comic creation folds into your grief. And maybe from what I've seen and how you've evolved with your art through the years since 2020, um, like what it brings to your life.
My God, it's such a positive impact on my life. Um, so my mom died my sophomore year of college, and then my senior year of college, I took this writing class called it was creative nonfiction, like so my jam now. Um, and we had to write some kind of personal essay, and somehow I did a comic for it about losing my mom. And I'd never done anything like that before. I'm not like one of those writers where it's like I was writing stories when I was a little kid. Like I wasn't. I was drawing pictures all the time, but not writing. And the process of translating this memory and all these like messy thoughts into drawing and writing at the same time just felt so like correct.
Hmm.
It was like the opposite of how you felt at Starbucks. This is right. Like I'm doing the right thing for me and for my brain. And now having made this book about grief, which has been out for a few years now, I've been in this like grief space for a while. It's how we met, and it's how I've met a whole bunch of people that I can like relate to in this way that I had very few people to relate to when I was going through everything with my mom. Um, so like the process of making the art is very comforting and it feels like a release getting to like take the stuff in my head and like dump it on the page. But also knowing that this community that I have, like that, those are the people that are going to be receiving the art.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to a friend, like it just, it is so, so comforting. Uh, I love like when people will write comments about things that aren't even about grief necessarily. Like I'll mention something annoying my mom did, and someone will be like, "My mom does that annoying thing too." It just it like rounds everything out. Um, yeah, it's been so positive. I have to say, Instagram and Meta and everything, it's all complicated, but man, I've gotten a lot of positive stuff out of that app.
And I like that you mentioned the audience factor too, because it's definitely one thing to create for yourself and kind of put things on paper for your own brain and for your own heart and for your own grief. But then also to have this community now of like people who you know are receiving your work, but not just that, but many of them are grieving people or people who are like emotionally tuned in, or people who just value art made from a real place of this has actually happened to me, of nonfiction place as opposed to a fiction place. It makes a huge difference of like who your work is going out to, should you choose to share it. It's one thing to put your work out to the masses. It's another thing to place it into the hands of people who are happy or excited to receive it, or just like grateful to receive it. And I want to nudge on this for people who are listening who might be early in their grief too. What Tyler picked up on is that I had this as well, especially in the first few years after my mom died. I felt like I had no community that felt like this. And there was kind of a bit of, and I didn't even really consciously know I was doing this, but I was like holding out to relate to people later. And when I started forming those relationships, not just through writing about grief, some about writing through grief, but some about just like looking more for people who'd also experienced losses in the real world that weren't like connected to me professionally. Um, and just like asking better or different questions about people's histories or like what they were interested in or what they loved or who formed them. What's your memorial tattoo about? Tell me more about that is one of my favorite openings, because I'm like, if it's on your body, you might want to talk about it. Not everybody wants to talk about their tattoos, but I just got better at noticing the grief in the world and asking about it, and then like relationships grew up from there. But there is this ache at the beginning for a community that gets it. And also there is such an appreciation for when that community comes down the road. It's like, this is what I've been waiting for. And so if you're in that early place, of course, connect with my work, connect with Tyler's, because you will find community in both of our homes on the internet, respectively. But also there can be a bit of a delayed community effect. Like those first few months, years can feel extraordinarily lonely, and also, especially with the way the world has changed now, in the world of podcasts and online grief support and audiobooks and things that like grief support on demand, community is coming together faster than ever. But yeah, this sense of it takes a little bit of time and focus to recalibrate the humans who are supporting you in the world and who and what you feel supported by, because it's not always the same as who and what you felt supported by before your loss, whether that's the death of a person or a divorce or a diagnosis or anything else that's changed your life, as you've said. Tyler, I want to give you a second to promo and plug your work. Obviously, the book is Dancing at the Pity Party. It's still in print. And my favorite part of it, and I won't share any pages of the book because I want people to go get it themselves. But my favorite thing about Tyler's work is like the exaggeration of facial expressions. In everything, it's like I stepped on a Lego, or like, okay, I will show one, but there's just like an in the top left hand corner here. But there's just like the way that you draw yourself experiencing a range of different emotions. I'm like, oh, I've been there too. I have also felt like a Lizzie McGuire cartoon character in my own brain.
That's what my art feels like. Oh my god. Yeah. It's the Lizzie McGuire cartoon. It's so
Yes.
accurate. Um, yeah, I'm like such a quiet, private person, and I feel like the way I am inside of my head is like, ah! So
Mm-hmm.
that's what comes out in my art. Uh, but yeah, so Dancing at the Pity Party is out. It's in paperback now. And then I post comics. I started this thing. I was doing Moodtober in October, where I was like, I'm going to do a journal comic about a different mood for a bunch of days in October. And then my dad went into hospice in November, and the whole thing just like fell apart. So I've been just continuing to do it now. I've done like a handful, and it's May of the next year. So we're keeping it real loose. But but I occasionally post comics on my Instagram, which is at Tyler Fetter. And I also have a children's book, Bodies Are Cool, that just came out in board book format 10 days ago. And I'm very excited about it. It has the dreaded trans representation in it. So lots of Republicans hate it, and it makes me happy to promote it more.
Well, and I love the idea, you mentioned this in your post on Instagram, you're like, it's a board book now, so you can like put it in your mouth or throw it across the room. Like, it's a kid's book, and so it's like you can be rough with it now without it being destroyed. Like the first edition of Bodies Are Cool. It's like you could totally tear some pages out of that and you'd probably never see them again. Yeah, I love it, and it's one of my favorite books about just like kind of like grief. Humans come in all sorts of iterations and shapes and sizes and manifestations. And instead of looking at that and being like, why is that weird? You look at that and say, isn't that neat? And it's just a reframe of how fantastic it is to have a body here. Yeah. So Dancing at the Pity Party and Bodies Are Cool. Absolutely. Add them to your bookshelf. Give them to a friend. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for coming on Grief Grower to talk about the calendar and grief dates and anxiety and what it's like to draw your way through grief. I'm really glad to have had you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're looking for grief support beyond this show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and quizzes at shelbyforsythia.com/links. If this podcast with Tyler felt validating, comforting, educational, or otherwise helpful to you, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And be sure to share Grief Grower with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. Shout out to the Grief Growers community on Patreon for helping me keep this show ad-free. If you'd like to join them, you can do that at patreon.com/shelbyforsythia. Grief Growers hosted by yours truly, Shelby Forsythia, with theme music by Addie Goldstein. Until next time, Grief Growers, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.